the 4-day week is a bit of shorthand, and you're right that that the movement is more diverse than just Monday through Thursday on, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. That is for more than half of companies that do this, so far as I can tell, sort of the preferred method. But really what joins all of these companies is that they are reducing working hours without cutting salaries or sacrificing productivity.
Hello everyone, today I'm excited to have as my guest Alex Soojung-Kim Pang. Alex is head of global programs for 4-Day Week Global, a non-profit evangelizing the 4-day workweek. He is the author of the books Shorter, Work Better, Smarter and Less, Here's How, Rest, Why You Get More Done When You Work Less, and The Distraction Addiction. His trilogy of books shows how companies and individuals can better integrate rest, creativity, and focus into digital age lives and work. Alex has been a senior consultant at Institute for the Future and Strategic Business Insights, and a visiting scholar at Microsoft Research Cambridge, Oxford University, Stanford University, and UC Berkeley. Alex received a Ph.D. in History and Sociology of Science from the University of Pennsylvania. Alex was my guest in the fall of 2020. Today's episode is a follow-up what has happened with the 4-day week since our last conversation, how it has spread further around the world, and in what areas it is being already implemented, the types of industries, and more. Hello, Alex. Welcome to the show today.
Oh, thanks very much. It's great to be with you again.
Yes, it is really nice to have you back. And so I would like to also say hello to everybody who might be viewing this conversation right now, live, or who is watching us later in a recap. So welcome everybody from around the world. And there might be some people, Alex, who may not know you yet. So could you introduce yourself with 5 facts according to the Working Out Loud method, please?
Okay, so sort of 5 facts about me. I am a rare California native. Myself and my wife actually both are from California. Even though I work as a consultant, I have an academic background. I have a PhD in history of science. I have 3 elderly dogs. Somehow over the course of time, we've managed to kind of start a senior home for animals. I have a strange and encyclopedic knowledge of Southern rock music lyrics, having grown up in the South in the during the golden age of Lynyrd Skynyrd and Marshall Tucker Band and the Allman Brothers. And I suppose the 5th thing is I'm terrible at yoga, but I like doing it anyway. And so those are 5 things that either are random or oddly illustrative. We'll see.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. And I remember in our previous conversation, I met at least one of your dogs. I remember who visited.
There is always a danger that another will make some kind of comment as we go along.
Yeah. So now, Alex, you've recently become the program director of the 4-day week global advocacy. Could you tell us more about your work?
Absolutely. So, 4-day week global is a nonprofit that was started by Andrew Barnes and Charlotte Lockhart. Andrew's company, Perpetual Guardian, quite famously moved to a 4-day week in, 2018 or early 2019. And on the basis of, he and Charlotte were inspired by that to start 4-day week global, whose purpose is to essentially kind of evangelize the virtues of the 4-day week and encourage other companies to trial it and adopt it. So in and so it's been going for a couple years. I just joined about a little over a month ago. So I am sort of like Joe Walsh to the Eagles, right? Sort of coming in after sort of, sort of a successful several years. And the work that I'm doing is I'm helping to organize sort of trials around the world, bringing together groups of companies that want to try a 4-day week and pairing them up with one another for one thing. It's always kind of strange and sometimes isolating, especially if you're a small company, to do something that radical. So it's good to have others who you can bounce ideas off of and commiserate and share successes. We're also pairing up companies with mentors, other companies that have already moved to 4-day weeks who can advise about pitfalls to avoid, things to worry about or not worry about, how they went about solving problems. And then finally, we're pairing up with academic researchers who are interested in issues around stuff like work-life balance and of the impact of a shorter work week or on stress levels, on sort of how effectively companies work, basically to try and get a better sense of across a range of industries how the 4-day week either benefits companies and people and what kinds of challenges they face. So it's a really exciting job and one that I'm looking forward to spending, sort of investing a lot of time and energy in. So
I mean, it sounds fascinating. And there are people who might be listening to us today. And so when they hear the 4-day work week or 4-day week, they might think, okay, Monday to Thursday and Friday off. But, maybe you could describe that not everybody is using that method as the 3-day weekend, that there is much more to it.
True. Yes. Really, or of the 4-day week, the 4-day week is a bit of shorthand. And you're right that that the movement is more diverse than just Monday through Thursday on, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. That is for more than half of companies that do this, so far as I can tell, sort of the preferred method. But really, what joins all of these companies is that they are reducing working hours without cutting salaries or sacrificing productivity. Andrew Barnes calls this the 180-100 sort of rule. 100% of the pay, 80% of sort of earlier hours, 100% of productivity. But there's plenty of flexibility in how sort of you put that into practice. There are some companies where maybe the work is more seasonal. And so it's not possible to do a 4-day week all the time, or of 52 weeks of the year. In other cases, if you're a retail establishment or if you're a government office, you need to stay open and stay responsive to your customers. Nursing homes have staff that need to be on for 24 hours a day. So what we are finding, though, is that across a wide variety of industries and job types, not meaning, both professionals or, who have a lot of control over their time or autonomy and can set their own deadlines, as well as, hourly workers, people working in restaurants, sort of nurses' assistants, that there are multiple strategies that companies take to achieve a shorter work week, but that it is a remarkably accessible goal for companies in all kinds of industries all around the world.
And when we first talked in it's now it was the end of 2020, so it's like a year and a half nearly ago. So you were describing the research you did for your book Shorter and the interviews you had done, and how, as you just said, such a wide variety of industries and companies and across the world, really, that people were implementing this new method. And so
Mhm.
now you've recently published the 4-day week 2020 annual report. And I'm curious if you could share with our viewers and listeners a little bit more about new, maybe countries or industries that have since then also started implementing the 4-day week.
Sure. You know, as has been the case for everybody, the last 2 years have felt like a really long time,
Yeah.
and that's been quite true for or the 4-day week movement as well. There's been an awful lot of stuff that's happened since Shorter came out, and I think a couple of the highlights are, first of all, we're seeing more involvement by by national governments.
Mhm.
This has not previously been much of a thing, but in 2020 Iceland moved its public sector, so about 15% of its total adult workforce, to shorter work weeks that vary depending on whether you're a night shift worker or you work during the day, and kind of and what union you are represented by. Everybody kind of made their own bargains. But starting in mid 2021, everybody has worked at most a 36-hour week, and some are down to 30 or even below that. Also in the United Arab Emirates, this January, the public sector and schools both moved to 4.5-day weeks. They also at the same time moved the weekend, right, from Friday and Saturday to Saturday and Sunday, though they also close, but offices also close Friday afternoons. The main impact of that was, number one, to kind of standardize UAE working time with the West. Second, the other important thing was it changed the day that brunch happens in the United Arab Emirates,
Hmm.
which I've never been to it, but apparently this is a really, really big deal. Other kinds of changes, we've also seen a big change in the way in which companies talk about and publicize the 4-day week. When I was working on the book, there weren't that many companies that were really noisy about the fact that they had shortened working hours, partly because it wasn't always clear what the response would be, even if they had had sort of great success with it. These days, though, you start a trial or you decide you're going to make the move, you do a press release or a celebratory video or post about it on LinkedIn. And I think what this tells us is that, first of all, just generally the kind of public acceptance for a shorter work week has gone up. Skepticism about it has gone down, and companies now see it as a way of distinguishing themselves from their competition, standing out in the marketplace, showing that they're living their values and that they care about their people. We've also seen a greater uptake in schools and in some professionals and in professional services that bill by the hour. So I've seen a bunch of law firms doing it. And anybody who's worked in or had experience with law firms might think this is like the last place where you would work a 4-day week, because because everything is built around billable hours. And yet it turns out that law firms have been able to do this and have done so quite successfully, and even in at least one case seen billing go up because people are better rested, because they're better able to focus at work, and because for the firm overall there are fewer interruptions from people burning out or having to go on medical leave or quitting unexpectedly. So so I think so. Those are some of the major things that I've seen in sort of the shorter work, or the shorter week movement, sort of over the last couple of years. I think the final thing is that the pandemic has not slowed down the adoption of the 4-day week, but if anything, I think has sped it up. As companies have had to go remote, they've discovered that sort of, it is possible for them to reinvent how they work, that their workforces often really need to have more time for them, for things like sort of caring for kids, dealing with home stuff, dealing with just the complexities of, living in a world in 2022 during a pandemic that won't go away. And that, in today's world, flexible work options or hybrid work are now like table stakes when you're trying to recruit people. That's no longer the thing that gets you, gets you noticed by, by good workers. And so a 4-day week, I think, is beginning to look attractive as a way of as a practical way of distinguishing yourself from, from the competition.
It is really so interesting how within, the span of 2 years, what you just said, remote
Right.
and hybrid work is a given. And now
Mm-hmm.
the stakes are going higher. What else can I do to differentiate myself from the competition? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
No,
it's
no, and I've had conversations with leaders who said things along the lines of, before the pandemic, I absolutely knew that we could never do work from home, right? That was just completely obvious to me. And my people proved me wrong in about 3 weeks. And that really made me question what other things could we do differently and do better. And the fact that so many companies were able to adopt this under really very adverse circumstances, right? Nobody had planned for this. There were all kinds of other things that everybody was dealing with in early 2020, and that lots of companies survived, that they found ways of working that were more effective. This really paved the way for for them asking what other things can we do differently, and looking at the 4-day week in a way that they would not have done previously.
yeah. I completely agree. Yeah, it's amazing. There are so many bad things about the pandemic, obviously, but that's to me the change and willingness overall from the industry and the companies to be more adopting new concepts of flexible work is remarkable. it,
Yeah.
it really is. Now, in your book, Shorter, now you mentioned that caregivers who are still predominantly women, that they don't only benefit from a 4-day week, but that companies who are implementing 4-day weeks are actually particularly looking out to hire them. Could you
Mhm.
explain this a little bit more to our listeners?
Sure. So, one of the companies don't adopt 4-day weeks either out of idealism or, because they're trying to like reinvent capitalism or something, right? They're trying to solve very specific everyday problems, right? Issues with work-life balance, with recruitment, with retention, trying to prevent or to reduce or prevent burnout in their staff. And, and it's particularly the case despite decades of often well-meaning programs, even at progressive companies, that flexible work programs or other kinds of part-time work programs only go so far to to alleviating the challenges that working parents and particularly mothers have, but also have created these enduring challenges around what sociologists call flexibility stigma, right? The fact that if that that women who work flexibly are often penalized for that choice, in that their lifetime earnings go down, they're less likely to be promoted at the same speed as their peers, and they're put on less interesting work. One of the things that happens, though, with companies that move to 4-day weeks is that number one, some of the subtle things that advantage single people or married men, who it turns out are essentially the same thing in the labor market, kind of get erased, because it's no longer useful in companies that work 4-day weeks to be the person who can stay late and work, sort of sleep under their desks. As one CEO told me, it no longer impresses me that you can work 12 hours. What I want is the person who only needs 6 hours to work, to get this in, and can knock out the work and be done and respect everyone's time and get out of there. And and there's a sense that, particularly in smaller companies, that the people who possess the combination of technical skill or professional experience, the kind of soft skills of empathy, judgment, but also a degree of ruthlessness and time management, right? An ability to focus, to do the thing, to move on to the next thing, etc. Who is it who has that particular combination of capabilities? Well, it's working moms, who often have more experience than, but are underemployed and underrewarded for it in traditional labor markets, and for whom those kinds of that capacity to focus, to be a little ruthless, doesn't really carry a lot of value. So, in companies that move to 4-day weeks, in contrast, rather than being penalized for motherhood, working moms are able to charge a premium for these abilities. The other important thing is that in flexible work programs, when one person moves to a 4-day week, there often is this lingering sense that, well, are they really getting the work done, or are they creating extra work for everybody else? It's seen as kind of a zero-sum game, right? There's a winner, and there's a question of, is someone else losing? In companies, though, that move to 4-day weeks, everybody is moving to a 4-day week. So everybody has to work together in order to make it succeed, and everybody benefits equally from having more time. And so that question of is the person who's working 4 days kind of creating extra work for us? The answer is no, because everybody's working a 4-day week.
Yeah, I think that is, and it also sort of from a feelings perspective, as you mentioned, that person feels everybody does it, so I'm not quote unquote burdening somebody else by, leaving early. It's everybody does it. And it also, creates, I feel, a much more a camaraderie. How can we ensure that we indeed can get all the work done? Do we need to have meetings, or can they be shortened, or other maybe streamlined processes that typically one might not have thought about beforehand, but now as time is at a premium, how can we do that? So yeah.
Absolutely. I think when individuals move to 4-day weeks, the burden is upon them to figure out how they can become more personally productive, right? How the work that happens between their eyes and the keyboard and the screen, how do you how do you boost the efficiency of that stuff? When an entire company moves to a 4-day week, on the other hand, the solutions are not individual, they are structural, right? It's how do you rethink collective things like meetings, like workflows? How do you inculcate changes in company culture? And a consequence of that is that you do not get into a situation where one person's improvement maybe comes at someone else's expense, but it's also the case that these turn out to be, I think, more enduring and sustainable solutions, because they're ones that everyone makes use of and everyone benefits from, in contrast to situations where one person maybe gets some benefit, but but because those practices don't spread, they're not benefits that really are shared by everyone.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned before that people are trying to implement 4-day a week as a further differentiation from the competition, and therefore maybe being able to attract and retain more talent. Do you have an example of a company that implemented the 4-day week and was able to, retain and attract more talent?
Yeah. So let's say one example would be Pursuit Marketing, which is a B2B company in Glasgow, Scotland. So Glasgow is like the telemarketing capital of Europe. And it's a place where there are lots and lots of companies. People tend to jump around a lot. You're in one place for 6 months, then you get offered a bonus to go somewhere else. It's very, it's a very salary driven industry with high turnover. Pursuit marketing, though, after it implemented a 4-day week, saw its turnover go from, I think, nearly 100% per year to something like 4 or 5%. And what that meant was that, I think in the first year they saved £250,000 in recruiter fees.
Yeah.
Plus, you had a better trained workforce that was able to apply its training in your company rather than in the competition. And you had all the other benefits that come from having a stabler workforce in which people have more time to get to know each other. Another great example is a nursing home in Virginia called the Glebe, who put their certified nurses assistants, the kind of frontline workers who spend time with residents, getting them dressed, bathed, fed, etc., on a program where they only worked 30 hours a week, but they were paid for 40 if they met certain weekly criteria. And this is a hard job, and it traditionally is not paid very well. And what they found was that even though they had to spend another $140,000 or so on salaries, because you need nurses 24 hours a day, they saved $120,000 in recruiting fees and in having to bring in someone at the last minute from a temporary agency at 4 times the normal pay rate. It also meant that quality of care went up. The number of slips and falls, bed sores, abrasions, even the use of psychotropic drugs all went down after they implemented this program. And as you can imagine, recruitment and retention shot way up. So retention in particular went from something like 140% a year to something around 15 or 20%. So those are 2 examples of really dramatic improvements in recruitment and retention that come about as a result of a shorter week.
Thank you so much for sharing these examples. It's really fascinating what a change of operating different hours, what it can do. And so I'm curious, going forward, so where do you see the 4-day week concept going over the next few years?
This is a terrific question. And I think that there are a couple big things. Number one, we are, in my capacity as sort of a program manager at 4-day week, one of the striking trends I am seeing is larger and larger companies being interested in it and trialing it. Most of the companies that I write about in my book were relatively small companies, fewer than 100 people. And, given that 90%, something like 90% of companies in the United States and Canada are companies that employ fewer than 100 people, that's actually, that's pretty significant. But what I'm seeing now are more multinational companies becoming, approaching us. Also seeing more interest coming, not from the very top of the company, the startup founder who wants to do this in order to, compete with Google for talent, but rather people in the middle, right? A senior person in operations or people in culture or HR who thinks this would be a really good thing for the company. And now I've got to figure out how to sell it to my bosses and to the board. So, it's bigger companies. It's also the interest is kind of germinating in somewhat different places. So that's, I think, one significant trend. Another thing is I'm seeing a greater interest in companies that can't exactly do a 4-day week, but are interested in applying some of the techniques in their own industries. So in particular, companies that are in very seasonally cyclical businesses, right? Lots of knowledge work happens regardless of the weather. If you're an advertising agency in Reykjavik or in, Rio, or of what's going on outside doesn't really matter. If you are in contrast, let's say a building contractor. There's a lot of work that doesn't happen in the winter months if there's 2 feet of snow on the ground. And so, you can't move to a 4-day week in the same way that, let's say, a web design firm can. But the question is, are there other ways of of learning the lessons of the 4-day week that you can apply in that industry? So those are a couple of the things that I'm already seeing. I think we're also, there used to be more of a binary either or choice that companies would make between 4-day weeks and flexible work. And that's definitely going away, right? I think that for some firms, the 4-day week offers a kind of incentive or kind of attraction to get people back into the office, maybe a couple days a week, but not full time. But it's part of a broader kind of strategy of rethinking how companies can be more mindful of how they design their time, how they design their work days, and how they design their workplaces to so that they can in order to create environments and routines that let people do their best work and do their most meaningful work. And then, I think that are there any other big things? I think those actually, I think finally, more, growing interest by on the part of governments and politicians, right? We saw in the United States the first introduction in Congress of proposed legislation to reduce the standard work week from 40 hours a week to 32. Not clear that anything's going to happen with that yet, but often with great big legislative moves, this kind of thing can take years, right, before it finally passes. So, but the fact that the 4-day week is no longer seen as this completely crazy outlier idea that's a career killer, but is the sort of thing that you want your name attached to, that can help you, help vault you from where you are now, maybe to the governor's mansion or the Senate or whatever, I think is another notable development.
It is really interesting. And as you just said, planting the seed, right? That just to make people aware that it exists. And to your point, I'm looking at the paid parental leave, right? I mean, it's been years and years, and
right.
I feel strongly that one day it will happen. But it's you plant the seed and more people get aware. So now it's been really fascinating to talk with you and hear the latest updates on the 4-day week. Now I just wanted to make sure, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners and viewers that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, if any of them are interested in finding out more, or finding out about how to join one of the trials, you can go to 4dayweek.com, and that'll provide all the information that you need in order to sign up and learn more, and maybe figure out if this is something that is that can work for you now. So and of course 4-day week global is on Twitter, and and everywhere you get fine social media. And so it's a great place to find out more about the movement and figure out how you can be part of it.
Thank you. And how can people reach you?
People reach me. So I am Ask Pang, AskPang, on Instagram, Twitter, just about everything else. My Instagram, honestly, is mainly my dogs, but every now and then there's a little bit of professional stuff, and people like dogs. So I'm not apologizing. I'm just explaining. And then my book is here. It is. It's out from Public Affairs, and so available everywhere fine books are sold. So, and other kinds of books like mine. So
Thank you so much. I so enjoyed reading your book, and I quote, from the
Oh,
book, and it's just like, so important that people are, learning more. I think
mhm.
awareness raising is really the key, and I feel the pandemic has really shown that, flexibility and innovation is the key.
Yes, absolutely. No, and it is something that is that can come from anywhere. It is something that sort of we all can benefit from if we are thoughtful about how to design and how to implement that sort of that innovation. So, and it's something that we all need. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Alex, for coming back to the show, providing us with an update. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We hope you gained valuable insights and new ideas. To keep listening to future episodes, please head over to iTunes or your favorite player and subscribe and give it a rating. We would very much appreciate a review and for you to share it on social media, so more people can start innovating in how they offer employment. Until the next time, goodbye!